hitting the required reading list hard here on Feature Please, which we're not anything right now. We're in a transition period, but my name is Joseph.
I'm your co-host, Peter.
And Peter, we have come together here in kind of an awkward spot because for the first time in Feature Please history, we're doing some homework before we launch into our next set of reviews. We are preparing ourselves for DS9 by actually revisiting TNG, which we've never done. We've done hundreds of episodes of the show. We've never watched an episode of TNG and talked about it ever, which is kind of exciting for us.
Well, we're not going to count These Are the Voyages.
I'd prefer not to.
Joe, I'm a TNG guy.
You are.
I came up in TNG as elementary school to junior high. I put my time in the Decipher CCG. I played the video games. It's interesting, even with all the work I put in as a young nerd, like, it still pales in comparison to the amount of nerding out that we've done with the podcast. But, I guess that's a byproduct of spending 2 hours a week focused on this stuff. But at my core, despite all the Voyager, despite all the Enterprise, well, I'd never be an Enterprise guy, but, all the Voyager, all the Enterprise, all the other stuff that we have watched or had experience, all the Star Wars and everything else, at my core, I am a next-gen guy, and I forgot that because of Picard Season 1. It was able to poison the well so hard that I was able to enjoy Season 3 of Picard, which felt like I thought I remembered TNG, but I just watched some fucking TNG.
Felt good, didn't it?
It felt real good. It felt amazing. And I sat down to watch it. I told the story on the trauma support group. I sat down to watch it. We had finished off Fallout, which get ready for some sort of content from us on that. I sat down to watch the required viewing material, which we have identified as Chain of Command, The Wounded, Season 4, Episode 12, Chain of Command Part 1. That's Season 6, Episode 10 and 11.
Ensign Ro, which I think was Season 5.
Was Season 5. Yeah, because Wounded was 4. And then Preemptive Strike, which was the penultimate TNG episode. And going into Wounded, with my wife sitting there on the couch with me for whatever reason she decided to sit down, and just being completely unprepared for some mid-season, Season 4 bullshit episode to come in and hit harder than almost anything that I could give you out of Voyager. And certainly the Enterprise Season 4 and some parts of Season 3, I think, punched in higher, but just, I don't want to call it a filler episode by any stretch of the imagination, but just mid-season, whatever, 4.
Yeah, like an episode you've probably never given a second thought about. Like, you've seen it, but you never paid it special attention. So let me set the stage just a little bit better for everybody here. So as we discussed our preparations for getting ready to do DS9, I made the suggestion to Peter that because DS9 is the middle child of Berman Era Trek and definitely the show to which continuity matters the most, that DS9 is at its starting point kind of assumes a certain level of knowledge on the part of the people watching of some very core concepts, that we should review the TNG episodes that really set the stage on those specific concepts. And that is as follows: the Cardassians, the Bajorans, the status of the Cardassian Union as a galactic power and the nature of its relationship with the Federation, i.e. the war they fought, the peace that was established, and the seriousness with which the Federation holds the necessity of holding that peace. And then I think last and certainly not least, Chief O'Brien, our key holdover character that is a main cast member on DS9 that was established originally on TNG. And then somewhat more minorly, the Maquis, which was really the focus of penultimate strikes. We'll kind of like catch up on that later because they end up being a huge part of DS9's plot. So, and to that end, I worked through all of TNG's episodes. I identified the Wounded Ensign Ro Chain of Command as things we should watch. It was actually Tom Selinsky that suggested to us that we should watch Preemptive Strike, who we interviewed a few weeks ago. So thanks. Shout out to Tom. Thank you so much for that suggestion. And I completely share your opinion. I have not touched TNG in so long. I've not touched DS9 as well because I knew eventually we might return certainly to DS9, maybe to TNG over the course of doing our own show, and I want to keep it nice and fresh. I forgot how good this show is. I forgot how good Patrick Stewart really was. When this was in its prime, it really was in its prime. And I feel like the episodes we picked really did well to establish the things that are going to be important as we start to get into DS9, kind of reset us and reminded us as to, what are these key players? Like the Cardassians, the main antagonist of DS9. Like, who the fuck are they, right? Well, thankfully, TNG kind of told us.
There were guys with really fucking terrible styrofoam suits that thankfully got a budget upgrade and got some new uniforms. That was my wife's key takeaway. She hated their uniforms. I don't think this really reminded me or refreshed anything that wasn't still pertinent in my mind, especially with all the talk of Maquis and Cardassian stuff that Voyager brought us through. Like, these are still fresh concepts. As I'm sitting there watching it, I didn't take notes because I wanted to just be like more of a passive viewing experience, but I can't help but have that podcaster eye for detail as we're going through. What would the directorial style feel like? What set pieces look chintzy and shitty? What script portions were unnecessary? Where was the pacing bad? Like all the stuff that you really start to pay attention to when you're watching and talking about this stuff every day. And not that TNG didn't have a stinker collection, but just these were all fucking smooth and good in ways that God forbid Enterprise or Voyager would get anywhere near these levels. We would just praise it up and down the wall.
Oh yeah.
The Wounded especially. The Wounded was a basic ass episode. Season 4, it's not tons of budget, right? Like Maxwell's ready. You don't even get to see his fucking bridge. He's got this goofy ready room that looks like a bedroom.
It's very spacious, very high ceilings.
The whole wall blinking with the red alert, right? And none of it matters because it's a compelling script that touches on humanity. There's a B plot kind of going on in there between O'Brien and his wife not seeing eye to eye on what constitutes a favorable dinner. That fits very well within the framework of the episode. It's not something terrible is threatening to blow up. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not T'Pol has space aids and might get a bunch of people arrested, and also Phlox's wife is horny. It's not this disjointed bullshit A plot, B plot. Just it's a pleasurable viewing experience, and every one of these episodes just hard reinforcing how fucking excellent TNG was, to the point that it was able to claw TOS out of the grave, put it on top of the mountain, and situated it so strongly there that it was able to carry 3 more complete series, despite terrible quality issues on 2 of them, for as long as it did.
I think that summarizes my thoughts quite well. For all of the things we said about Patrick Stewart having perhaps lost more than a few steps by the time he was doing Picard season 1, what a splendid reminder of why he is the GOAT than to watch some of these episodes.
Chain of Command especially.
Yeah, I mean, Chain of Command really are 2 that focus specifically on him. He is not really the main character of The Wounded. He's a very important part of Ensign Ro. He actually directed Preemptive Strike. So I think that might explain some of the choices we'll get to there. Yeah, but
shades of Polynesian Resort.
Yeah, well, listen,
Robert Picardo.
I just think that maybe Patrick Stewart made a real point of saying there was going to be a lot of sex-eye between him and Michelle Forbes in that episode, and he got his wish. Though I think it worked for the plot in that case.
Yes.
But for The Wounded in particular, as much as Picard is not the focus of the story, he is an extraordinarily important part of the story, and he elevates the material so effortlessly every time he's on screen. Every scene he's in, it's never he never mails it in, like, ever. He's always putting in effort, and it's a wonder to behold that it's not a surprise to me that this show was as popular as it became. Every time I rewatch, I'm like, oh, no wonder. This is so much better than anything else anyone was watching on television with him on it.
Why do you think it had a stigma, man? You couldn't. I wonder when I was in junior high and high school, maybe even elementary school, but that's, I was big on this. I was big on this stuff back then. And I was a fucking nerd, and it was not cool. I wonder how many people in the school were watching Star Trek Next Generation with their parents or just on TV and just kept their fucking mouth shut and went to baseball practice and didn't say anything about it. I
think probably a lot. A lot of people didn't necessarily make it their personalities.
And I get it too. We've got hobbies, and there's one of my favorite terms I was ever introduced to was keener, which is a Canadian term. And that's just people who are too into something, people who allow a hobby to become their primary identity.
Right.
To keeners are a big problem with Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty. I hate Rick and Morty fans.
Been there. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure I was a Trek keener in high school. And yeah, you don't want to okay, man, those guys, they're too heavy into it. I don't want to admit that I like this stuff because then I'm going to get lumped in with the keeners over there. But I guess keeners would have developed the stigma of why it wasn't cool or acceptable to announce that you were into that stuff. And I think to a certain point that doesn't really exist anymore. I saw a lot of people wearing Game of Thrones t-shirts.
Well, I think
a lot at its peak,
there's a lot of pop culture franchises that become more acceptable as part of a group gestalt. I think fandom culture has certainly become far more acceptable and something people are willing to embrace because of the internet.
And to be fair, Game of Thrones, you got tits and blood. That's a lot more hardcore than
it's on HBO. It has a different it's
different, yeah.
Yeah, je ne sais quoi when it's on HBO. But
hey, speaking real quick of HBO, fuck Paramount Plus.
Yeah, let's get this out of your system. I know you got a grievance.
I forget why I signed up for Paramount Plus because I wanted to watch the South Park episode on Disney, and I watched it. And then I watched a bunch of Lower Decks, and I was like, all right, I got this fucking thing for a month. I'll let it run. And then I went to cancel. And when I went to cancel, they said, oh, no, please don't cancel. What if we give you 3 months for free? And I said, okay, you got me. And then it just sat there doing nothing. And then I went to go watch these episodes, and I was like, well, I see that I was negligent, and Paramount Plus busted me for $15 or $13, whatever it was. So rather than just watch TNG on my Plex account, I'll watch it on Paramount Plus so I know that I'm getting the high def remasters, which, spoiler alert, I have those on Plex anyway, so I didn't need to fucking do all this. Paramount Plus is such a piece of shit. It doesn't remember where I'm at on anything. I had to fucking go in and dig these episodes out every time. And God forbid you touch the jog button to go backwards or forwards. The whole app just fucking crashes. It is miserable. Paramount is a shit show. I don't know who's going to end up buying them. Skydance, Warner Brothers, whatever. But take this platform and throw it in the fucking trash where it belongs. I canceled that shit and it felt great.
It's one of the worst UIs. It has one of the worst playback experiences. I have a Peacock subscription. Quick shout out, by the way, if you've never watched the Peacock original television program In the Know, which is...
Yes.
Have you seen it?
I've seen a couple of them. It's too real to the point where...
I've never laughed harder in my fucking life than watching that fucking show as someone who spent his entire life watching and listening to NPR. I mean, it is made for me. I had to stop an episode because I couldn't stop laughing. Specifically the racial reckoning one.
I think I got to the one where they are concerned that his voice is making people nauseous.
Yeah. Yeah, there's an episode later where he forces everyone to have a racial roundtable so they could have a racial reckoning because he feels like his body is racist, even though his mind is not. Like it's so good. It's so, but they knew exactly who they were making fun of and how they were making fun of them. But I think it was during the Pledge Drive episode when Carl comes out and says, "Oh, it turns out NPR listeners are a bunch of neoliberal masochists who love to have their balls stepped on." It's too real. Anyway, watch In the Know. It's a great 6-episode comedy by Mike Judge. You should watch it. It's funny.
Just don't watch it on Paramount Plus.
Yeah, but Peacock, right? Peacock, which is a streaming service that came after Paramount Plus. A lot of UI stuff is patented by different services. So that's why sometimes some services have it really figured out and some don't. But Peacock's experience is great. Their UI works fine. I love it. But whoever fucking designed Paramount Plus is they run a Cardassian fucking torture center. Like, I don't understand. It's awful.
That's actually how they got Rolaren's dad.
They made him keep find me Top Gun. He just died. He couldn't get there. He died. So I overall, I think these episodes really capture well the stuff that we wanted to review. And first and foremost on that list is the Cardassians themselves. All right. Our antagonist race for DS9. Like you said, we really get a big taste of them in The Wounded. They get a big upgrade by the time we're seeing them further in Chain of Command. It's the next time we really see them. By then, Chain of Command is occurring in the contemporaneous with the beginning of DS9, which is important, kind of the note. That's actually kind of mentioned in the plot that Chain of Command is happening because DS9 started.
Yeah.
And then Preemptive Strike, obviously, we're continuing that. It's during season 2 of DS9.
I did not have an opportunity to read the memory alphas on these. And looking at the Wounded's memory alpha, it's like basically all of season 3 of Enterprise in one memory alpha. Do you think they knew? Let's see. The Wounded, season 4, episode 12, first aired January 28th, 1991. Teleplay by Jerry Taylor. Story by Stuart Charno, Sarah Charno, and Cy Shermick. Directed by Chip Chalmers. Real quick, jumping up to the Emissary. Teleplay by Michael Piller. Story by Michael Piller, Rick Berman, and Preemptive Strike. Nothing in there for any of these.
You said the Emissary?
The Emissary. Just, I wanted to look at is there any overlap between The Wounded and Emissary? Did they know that the Cardassians would be the next big thing? Or were these throwaway jabroni, what were they called? The Vaude War? You know, was this just the Vaude War and then David, God, why I keep blanking on this guy's name? BSG guy.
Ron Moore.
Did Ron Moore look back and say, hey, there's potential here. Let's flesh these guys out. Let's uplift them and turn them into a big fucking deal. These are going to be our Romulans.
Unclear on if this episode that they had already launched on that idea, but so much of we get in this first episode that we reviewed is a template for the future that they hold to, not just through TNG as they continue to establish the Cardassians, but further all the way through DS9. up to including first. We should point out in this episode, Mark Alamo played one of the played the Cardassian captain, played Gul Lamech, I think his name was.
What is a Gull? Captain?
Captain. And this is important because that actor is the guy who plays Gul Dukat. So they just basically recast him as a different character, and he acts exactly the fucking same.
Well, I mean, that's Armin Shimmerman, right?
Yeah, he's played other.
He played the first Ferengi,
and then he plays
to come back.
Ferengi. Yeah, plays the defining Ferengi.
Robert Duncan McNeil. This is a time-honored tradition of fuck that. I like this character, but fuck that writer. We'll just rename this guy so they're not getting royalties.
I think that they had a very specific idea. No, it's Gul Macet. I'm sorry. So he plays Gul Macet in this episode. And, he's got a pretty narrow role here. It's very specific and very important. Gul Dukat is a much more expansive character. There's a very specific plot going on. It gets very deep. He's the antagonist of the show, but he's a main character on the show, which is very different for an antagonist on Trek.
This Mark Alamino I'm looking at, so this is Ducat's actor. He was one of the dog people from Lonely Among Us.
Yes, he was. And then he played, I guess, one of the Romulans in the Neutral Zone. And then after that, it's basically different versions of Dukat at different times of DS9. But they obviously liked exactly where he got with his performance here. And we're like, well, why don't we just recast this guy, right? Like, he seems to really understand what we're going for with Cardassians, which is my important point, which is these dudes suck. They are very nasty. They are space Nazis. they are very jackbooty thug in a way that our existing Alpha Quadrant species are not, right? Romulans are very shifty. They're very espionage oriented. They're very duplicitous. Klingons, they're warlike, but they're like heavy metal samurai,
Yeah.
Not at all what you would call particularly well organized politically. they're a warrior class, not a militaristic people. It's very different. Whereas the Cardassians are very, very clearly militaristic, fascistic, well-organized, antagonistic people who evidently are happy to commit to crimes. I mean, they're okay playing not just up to the line, but over it and seeing if they can get away with it or not, right? Like, these are not people who are going to observe treaties.
The wounded portrayal that you're left with, I think, is hopeful up until the last, couple scenes where Maxwell's like, hey, go on that ship. You're going to find weapons and contraband. And Picard confronts Macet and says, by the way, we both know there's dirty shit in there. And I didn't go on because war is bad. And that's what's going to come out of this. So, like,
yeah, I didn't go on because I was ordered to preserve the peace. And if I actually went on there, I would not have succeeded in my orders because of what I would have seen. And I know it, and you know it, and we all know it. Maxwell was wrong in what he did, but not wrong in what he knew.
So Macet talks a good game through the whole thing, that he is a peace first person, that they're trying. There's so many times there's like a last minute dun dun dun. Oh, there's a sinister thing zooming on the eyes. Oh, this is, like that person was evil. And I think Voyager handled it very clumsily. And this is a great example of the inverse where I don't know if I want to say it was surprising, but it becomes disappointing. Like, man, this guy really seemed like he was a visionary and pro-peace. And here he is being a shitbag. His aides that he brings over, especially the conversation between O'Brien and whatever the aide's name is in 10-4 that's like, hey, you want to go get a beer? And then O'Brien kind of flies off the handle and eventually like reconciles and tells him the story about like how he killed guys. And it's like, I don't hate you. I hate what you guys made me become. Like, again, that seems like classic Star Trek, like peace bridge building, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking inward. I'm finding my own problems. I'm addressing them. I might have been projecting onto you. Maybe we can just be dudes having a beer and it can be nice, which again feels very one story, beginning, middle, end, TNG. All right, move on to the next thing. That was a great adventure. We did good. Now we're warping off to another place to go save the day. To see that, when you come into on Chain of Command, or is it Ensign Ro? Yeah, Ensign Ro. That like, oh wait, no, these guys are shitty. The Wounded, real quick. I don't know what hashtag Maxwell was right.
Yeah. Not wrong. Man was just on the ball.
So you got the warden from the Shawshank prison.
Yes, you did.
Captain Benjamin Maxwell, captain of the Phoenix Nebula class, which, these aren't throwaway things to me. Again, so much of my knowledge goes back to the Decipher CCG, and there was a benefit. If you had the captain for the ship, on the ship, that ship got a benefit. So you became very aware of who the captains of which ships were, and you tried to synergize, blah, 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 blah. The Phoenix, the Nebula class is classic Star Trek kit bashing. What if you take an Enterprise model, a Galaxy class model, and just flip some pieces upside down, glue it together, and now it's an upside down Enterprise, but it looks different. Like, apparently Nebula classes are fucking badass.
Oh yeah, especially the Phoenix has the giant torpedo array on top of it for extra fucking powers. And they also set a really nice tone with the position of the Cardassians in Alpha Quadrant politics, which becomes extraordinarily important as DS9 goes on, as well as the nature of the war that the Federation fought against them, which all occurred before TNG really happened, as something that Picard participated in when he was the captain of the Stargazer, which he relates during The Wounded.
Anybody out there, and I called for it before, if anybody out there has a resource that details all of the wars between TOS and the beginning of TNG, Cardassians in there. There's some Klingon engagements. Well, Kittimer was what? The Enterprise C, right? So that was...
Yeah, the Enterprise C fighting the Romulans there, yeah.
What other big wars were there?
So this is actually the biggest conflict during what's called the Lost Era, which is what you're referring to, right? This era between when TOS era things stopped and TNG began, which is an extensive period of time when you think about like when Star Trek 6 is supposed to occur. It's like 80 some years or something in that gap. And this conflict is the biggest one. And it occurred essentially 20-ish years before TNG began, and it kind of extended from that point almost to the beginning of TNG. But it wasn't a real war in the sense that you had constant conflict on the part of the Federation and the Cardassians in an organized military fashion. What you would call it is they were fighting border skirmishes in much the same way in more contemporaneous geopolitical sort of frame of mind. You might call the border conflicts between India and China that occur. That's not something necessarily that hits the U.S. news, but is a big deal for them, fighting kind of like the mountain ranges and across the Himalayas. You had Federation colonists that were encroaching, getting closer and closer to the Cardassian border. You had Cardassian colonists getting closer and closer to the Federation border, and it brought them into conflict. But the problem for the Cardassians, as gets relates both in this episode and then a lot in Chain of Command, in the conversation that the Torturer has with Picard, is that the Cardassians aren't as powerful as the Federation. They couldn't beat them. Right. It wasn't a matter of one of them conquering the Federation. It was a matter of if the Federation was prepared to devote the resources necessary to actually beat the Cardassians, which, because the Federation despises war and doesn't fight war for territorial expansion, clearly attempted not to for an extended period and instead fought in a more defensive manner, trying to eventually reach some sort of armistice and negotiated peace to create a defined border. right? That's kind of the status, is that the Federation, if we're to relate this to more Earth normal geopolitics, the Federation is a great power, and the Cardassian Union is what you would call a middle power, which is important regionally, can have influence, but can't compete with the power of the Federation. And that dynamic is so important to literally everything that happens in DS9. Because the Cardassians are never the ones who are holding the whip hand who can make the Federation do things. Instead, what they are forced to do is try and find weak points. Like, we can't beat the Federation. Maybe we can get this system. We can't beat the Federation. Maybe we can push them around on something like this. Maybe we can use the fact that they don't want to fight wars to see how much leverage we can give ourselves by pushing them up to and past the limits and how much they're willing to give. And that tone is set right here, right? Like, what is the plot of The Wounded? It's that Maxwell, who was in the trenches and whose ship was constantly having to patrol the Cardassian border and fought them more than most, knows these shifty assholes are up to something and that they need to be dealt with harshly or they will cause all kinds of nonsense. So I'm going to find their fucking secret weapon stashes. I'm going to blow them the fuck up. I'm going to find their transport ships that are trying to arm, get ready to invade our space. I'm going to blow them the fuck up. Why? Because that's my job. I'm a Federation, Starfleet captain, and I know what these people are about. I've been killing Klingons I've been killing Cardassians a long time, and I know how to do it.
And I resent Federation bureaucracy.
Right.
And that's what Picard grills him on once he finally gets him over there and says,
you're out here freelancing when we can't do that.
What you're going to start a war? And Maxwell's like, what's my alternative? Submit reports that never get answered. Like, if there's anything that the Wounded's missing, it's the key that colonists are dying, which clearly, they cover because Maxwell's own family died to this bullshit. And O'Brien witnessed it firsthand, but like, Federation citizens are dying while Starfleet basically looks the other way. And if I'm not out here protecting them, then who is? That dude, gosh, what's his name? Maxwell.
Oh, the actor? I forget his name. Like you said, Shawshank Redemption prison warden guy who's still working as an actor, apparently.
Bob Gunn. Well, he portrayed Egon Spangler in the reboot. Not the reboot, but, Ghostbusters 3, basically.
Oh, that's right. He did, yeah.
Great guy. And very, it would be so easy to just be like, oh, that's the Shawshank warden. But like, he is so strong in this role that to me, he's always been Captain Maxwell. The baggage he's carrying around, just strong performances across the board. And I don't know, did you see the Facebook conversation we had on this?
Remind me for everyone else.
We were talking and the one guy's like, oh, my wife, refuses to watch Picard season 3 because of how bad Picard season 1 was.
Yeah.
Like, how funny this conversation came up. Like, I respect about how funny that, we're sitting there talking about carrying a grudge on a conversation topic on The Wounded, which is, about not being able to let bygones be bygones and move on with life.
It's like old leather. Yeah.
The Cardassians are interesting, and you'll find out in Chain of Command that once upon a time, basically before the military took over, they were very artistic and spiritual people. And then somehow ruin and hardship came and people starved by the millions, and it created an opportunity for this fascist regime to take over and hold power because now people were being fed. And society changed as a part of that. You say that you think the war with the Cardassian was going 20 years prior to The Wounded. I mean, that puts these guys in a long service history, like O'Brien, Maxwell, Picard. That's a big commitment in terms of like, although they could have came in towards the tail end of it, I suppose.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about a circumstance in which they weren't fighting a ongoing, open, giant, organized military conflict with the Federation. They were instead engaged in kind of like an ongoing low-level border war.
So the answer is because it's a TV show and that's not the story that they wanted to tell. But, if you're going to take this stuff in character, do they really broach why the Romulans or especially the Klingons weren't just like, hey, we like war and here's some runts that we could go in and just gang stomp and conquer, and nobody likes them. The Federation certainly doesn't care about them with all the wars they fight. Like, we're just going to go and conquer all that shit, and that's going to be part of us now. Like, especially the Klingons. I would think the Klingons would be like, oh, you guys like to fight? Good. We like to fight, too. Here we come.
I think it's more of a sort of position of where things are supposed to be in the galaxy, which is, of course, a very contentious issue because maps are something that are never
evil.
Never very consistent. So
maps and timelines.
Most maps typically put the Cardassian Union on the opposite side of the Federation of the Klingon Empire. So that's really like your main reason as to why. They call this when DS9 breaks out, the Alpha Quadrant, is actually mostly the Federation and the Cardassians. The Beta Quadrant is the one that contains the Romulans and most of the Klingon Empire. So, so with that said, the long service history of Miles O'Brien is a feature that gets introduced in this episode, that he had been serving for a couple decades by the time we've really met him here. Because before, he's really just been a background extra. But this is when his story really starts. And what we find out about Chief O'Brien here is really the beginning of his lore, which is that he may be the man with the biggest fucking personal death count in the entire Federation. That's really the direction they decide to take, to say that Chief O'Brien has probably finished more faces as a soldier of the Federation than anybody else around. And
living,
he is not
obviously.
Living, obviously. And he is not an officer. He is an enlisted man. He is Chief Petty Officer Miles O'Brien.
Which, speaking to that, he was Maxwell's tactical officer. Does that jive with Starfleet as we know it, that there would be an enlisted guy on guns?
So that's not lore that they've actually ever really developed in A canon. So it relies on going into books to like tell you exactly why that is the case, which is always a bit dodgy because that's not.
Wasn't O'Brien like ops or something on the battle bridge when they saucer separated back in Farpoint?
Correct. Before they really knew what his character was going to be, right? And he was just another guy.
Sure.
So, but the way they square that circle is that during the Cardassian War, they had enough casualties that you had to have people start to fill in that weren't necessarily rated to do those things, that had proven their capacity to do them. So he was served as a tactical officer despite being an enlisted man, because that's just the circumstances that they were on the Rutledge. But when he reverted back to his normal billet, he's Chief O'Brien, Chief Petty Officer Miles O'Brien, which means even any ensign technically outranks him. Any officer outranks him. And he is somebody who fought hand to hand against the Cardassians and has in fact killed them. And he relates that story here. And he hates Cardassians because they turned him into a killer. That he took his first life as a consequence of these border wars. And as we'll find out later, took a lot more lives as the wars went on, and defined him as who he was.
Pretty well-adjusted guy from what we've seen so far, despite all that blood on his hands.
Oh, don't worry.
I think that episode, it does a nice job showcasing the Federation naivety. Like, all right, hey, you just have already blown up at least a colony and now 2 ships that we know about and killed like 900 people. but we're going to let you captain the ship back to Starf Base, whatever, so you could be held accountable instead of just putting you in the brig and letting your first officer, or me sending Will Riker over there to fly your ship back. And my wife's like, what? Does everybody work the same shift? What happens when the other guys are on the bridge and something bad happens? Does everybody just go up to the bridge then? What happens if everybody's drunk? And then I have to explain what synthahol is. Well, that seems dumb. Why can't it be real alcohol? Well, because getting drunk is not a good guy thing to do in the future. And she's like, is killing 800 people a good guy thing? And I'm like, no. And that's why they had to go get him. They're like, but they let him go back on his ship. I'm like, listen, if this is a plot hole that's tripping you up, let me just tell you, stay the fuck away from Voyager and Enterprise. Like, that's not going to be a good time for you.
Well, it is a very British naval type of move to do that. So the idea here is Benjamin Maxwell is somebody who had a very strong war record.
Highly decorated,
someone with a lot of respect. So much so that he's the captain of a major Federation vessel, a Nebula class ship. And so it would be considered showing his career deference to say, I'm going to let you retain the honor of and your dignity in commanding your vessel back to the starbase before you're put on trial for a court martial, rather than put you in prison. So say you've fucked up, I'm here to come get you, but because you've been so good to the Federation in your service, you get to retain the dignity of your command and complete this mission and return home. So that's why that would be permitted. The idea of, I'm going to kind of give you this, samurai honor type of thing, like British naval command honor. It's in that sort of realm. It's very foreign to, I think, the U.S. experience. So it's not necessarily something that makes the most logical sense. Because again, you'd think like Casey did, which is, why the fuck would you assume this guy wouldn't go immediately start committing crimes again?
This is a good episode to argue against Starfleet's actually rotten and full of bad people.
That's true.
The fact that they give him the honor or try to give him the decency to fly back in his own ship, which he then abuses and goes and blows up more ships or whatever the fuck he goes off and does. But this is a strong entry into like, maybe Starfleet isn't that bad. Which, of course, he does just go, oh, hey, thanks for my ship back. Whoop, off I go over here. Anyways, by the end, Maxwell was right. And I was like, man, what a compelling story this guy must have based on what's going to happen in Deep Space Nine. I sure hope they bring him back. And I guess that's the bad part of getting the Shawshank prison warden, is that he's probably became pretty expensive. And for whatever reason, this dude never got any more screen time. It looks like there's some cool stuff that happens in novels and stuff, but I saw some stuff saying that maybe Chakotay had served, or Chakotay served under him, or interesting stuff like that. But
the Chakotay actually does get a reference in one of the episodes we listened to, and we'll get to that. But yeah, Bob Gutton hitting it big on a big Hollywood movie probably prevented that from happening. But
was Shawshank before or after this?
After.
Oh yeah, well there you go.
So, but still great start. Learn a lot about the Cardassians, learn about the position of the Cardassians, the seriousness with which the Federation takes the peace treaty that was developing then, hadn't been finished, but there was a detente, and they wanted to keep that pace because the Federation is interested in fighting wars. And in fact, in the Apocrypha, the Federation struggle in conflict against the Cardassians, despite being more powerful, is what actually led to the revivification of Starfleet ship design that ended up creating the New Orleans Nebula and Galaxy class starships.
Wait, what happens?
So they struggled to fight.
The Rutledge was a New Orleans class, by the way.
Correct. And they struggled in their conflict with them because they had all these Miranda class ships are getting the shit kicked out of them all the time, and just their starship designs were old and hadn't been kept up. And so as part of kind of struggling to deal with this otherwise minor power, led them to say, we got to construct ships that are capable of handling these kinds of circumstances.
Is that the Yodyne initiative?
Correct.
Interesting. That's the other thing that struck me is watching the D back up on screen and just the constant reminder this thing is full of kids, especially when we get into Chain of Command and like the shit that they're about to get into spearheading the war against the Cardassians. Like crazy.
Yeah, not a good idea. Maybe not. Let's not run that back.
Mm-hmm.
What we should run back though is talking about a character that I think we both love, and that's Ensign Ro.
So
Ro
easy
Laren.
to forget her, man. Like,
Yeah,
for as big as she is in the series, I was looking at like all the stuff she was included in. Again, always a welcome character, minus Rascals. Michelle Forbes is a powerhouse in everything she's in. If I could read minds, or I would say her decision to skip DS9 is right up there with my gossip urge with why Jennifer Lean was let go from Voyager.
well, the understanding of why Michelle Forbes chose to skip out on DS9 is a little bit more clear. She did not enjoy being on TNG. She did not have a good relationship with Rick Berman. It's why ultimately, despite the fact that she was a fan favorite, she was only in like 9 episodes of TNG. And they really fought to convince her to come back to even do Preemptive Strike to sort of close out Ro Laren as a character. What was the idea there? And so, they wrote DS9 with the intention of giving it to Michelle Forbes, that Ro Laren was going to be the Bajoran XO of Deep Space Nine. And they changed it to Kira Nerys after Michelle Forbes said, I have no interest in doing this. And it had nothing to do with not wanting the work, anything to do with not liking the character. She just did not have a good relationship with the people who made this. And it made it so she just didn't do very much of it.
Man, I wonder how scandalous that got.
Had to have been something, right? Like, I don't think that's not for no reason.
Well, take it at the most innocent level. Look what happened to Jerry Ryan. Look what happened to Paul. I'm blanking on her name. Like, even if you are a main character in Berman era Trek, you're there for boobs and butt. And maybe she saw the writing on the wall.
They never did that to Kira, though. I mean, and they certainly never did it to her. So
maybe because she didn't let them.
True.
Maybe the contract wasn't there to force it. I mean, I don't know how all that works out behind the scenes, but
yeah, even when she fucks Will Riker, it's not exactly done as exploitive.
No. And again, it was never that exploitive. And what's the raciest moment you can remember in TNG?
Oh, that would definitely be when Counselor Troy answers the door when she is under the control of that like exterior entity that's kind of making her horny. She had just fucked some random crew member, and she had on this nightgown that was sheer, and you could totally just see her tits.
Drop in the bucket compared to most of Enterprise and a lot of Voyager.
Definitely, but the one I just described happened when I was like 12, so I definitely remember it more.
I'm just saying. I mean,
I'm like, oh yeah, I like girls.
Out,
That's what that
stuff
was.
Stuck out like a sore thumb. Like
it did.
You didn't have Orion slave girls. You didn't have decon scenes. You didn't have skin tight.
Oh, compared to Enterprise, TNG was chaste.
Right,
it was chaste.
You know, the capacity I don't think was there.
No.
Ensign Ro, does that Admiral come back in any capacity?
Kennelly, no. No, I don't believe he ever does.
Because that dude got clowned pretty good. And the whole point of Ensign Ro is that you have Starfleet admirals that are evil and crazy. And you got some Starfleet admirals that are just stupid and naive. And Ro Laren is brought in to root out a Bajoran terrorist cell leader that the Cardassians just want dead. The Cardassians stage an attack on a Federation outpost and blame the Bajorans and trick this admiral into trying to create a situation where they're given this guy on a silver platter, which Picard, evades. Guinan, another character that's easy to forget, was in the show. Like, nice use of these strong secondary characters. And I think Ensign Ro was a really good episode in that, like, Picard was handed a real fuck you situation, was still able to, like, play it off in a believable and engaging way.
This episode's most important for our homework purposes to establishing Bajorans. So I guess we'll call them our primary protagonist race that's really unique to DS9. They're very important to everything that goes on. The entire mission of Cisco has to do with them, and this is our introduction to them. And in the case of the Cardassians and the Wounded, in the case of the Bajorans here, we do have what we call the beta version of the race, so the makeup is going to change a little bit. Some of the pronunciation, some of the way that they're portrayed is.
How does Picard say Marquis? McQuai? He doesn't say Maquis. He's got a real interesting pronunciation of it.
Yeah, I think he has a little bit more of an R in there. And in this episode, we get the Bajoran backstory, which is their planet has been taken over by the Cardassians. The Cardassians are brutal slavers who can and will torture people to death in front of their children. That the Bajorans themselves, as a consequence, many have fled. They are kind of portrayed in that way that, I don't know, kind of, what do you call it? Refugee-like. So they
nomadic.
are nomadic refugees. They're unwanted most of the places they are. They're treated poorly.
Quarian.
Yeah, Quarian-ish.
Yeah.
They are pushed to the margins. Many of them are living in camps. They don't have basic supplies. And their plight has gone unresolved by the Federation's influence, to which they are at least somewhat negatively predisposed as a consequence. There's a point made that they don't attack the Federation, that they are not violent towards them, but they also don't like that the Federation hasn't done anything about their situation in regards to their oppression on the part of the Cardassians. And so this episode has a lot to do with what's going on with them. What are these people about? Are they the bad guys? Are they the good guys? Turns out they're the good guys. And, who is Ro Laren and why is she in Starfleet? And we get so much more about them as a consequence of DS9, but I think this flavors it enough that when we start to pick up on where we're at with them in DS9, it makes sense, right?
Did they ever hash out what Ro Laren did that got everybody killed on her previous assignment that sent her to the stockade?
They never say on screen, but like in a book, I believe they defined that she was leading an away team and she disobeyed orders and everyone died except for her. And I do like that no one wants her on the Enterprise, that these guys are professional elitists, and they don't like the fact that they're serving with somebody that is a criminal that was court-martialed
when you think
on the
Geordi
flagship.
Shitting on somebody, and that's the great line from Riker is that, there's people who wait years for a chance to serve on the Enterprise, and like, you don't want to be here, we don't want you here. Like, this is a big problem.
And what a big measure of respect it is on the part of Picard to reach out to her at the end to say, I want you to stay. I want you to rebuild your career under my wing. I think you've got promise. I will protect you and allow you to be here.
So much payoff in Picard season 3.
Ooh, so much.
And, my wife caught it backwards because she watched season 3 with me and she's like, why is this lady such a big deal? I'm like, oh.
You're about to find out.
If only you knew. And, lo and behold, we got the chance to go back and watch that. And then you get into Chain of Command, which powerhouse episode. My question on the forums was, do you think that this was not used as a seasonal finale and season opener because the Picard gets taken hostage thing had just been used by Best of Both Worlds?
Definitely. I think that had to have been part of it. I think they also knew they wanted to revisit the Borg at the end of season 6 to kind of like, because that was kind of the end of their use of the Borg on TNG. They wanted to follow up on the consequences of Hugh, right?
The lore mercenary
Correct.
factions.
And so, Hugh factors into that. Like, they did return him to the collective. There was a consequence of that. Here it is. And that makes much more sense because that's such more of a vital story, specifically not only to Picard, but ultimately also to Data because they involve lore. But for this, I think making it a mid-season 2-parter makes more sense.
So good, though, man.
Amazing. This episode occurs as DS9's beginning, and it's set off because of what? The Cardassians have left Bajor. And that means they have more forces available to them to maybe push in on the Federation shit elsewhere in response to the things that happen there as a consequence of them leaving.
Chain of Command Season 6, Episode 10, first aired December 14th, 1992. Teleplay by Ronald Moore. Story by Frank Abra Tamarco. Is that a name you recognize?
No.
Ronnie Cox. You got Listen, you put any amount of RoboCop into TNG, and it's going to be fucking gold right now. I'm telling you, Ronnie Cox, CEO of OCP. Okay? You got Peter Weller, RoboCop himself, CEO of Moon Mining LLC, or whatever the fuck that was. And then you got Red, Space Boddicker. Gosh, there's a function on IMDb where you can put two properties and it'll show you the overlap. I wonder how deep I have to go before I find someone from RoboCop who was not absolutely brilliant in a Star Trek production. Who knew the synergy was there?
Was Officer Lewis a background extra on something and we don't know about it?
She might have been a crazy admiral. I don't know. Yeah, maybe she was on the planet that tried to condemn Wesley Crusher to death for stepping on the flowers, Angel 1.
Speaking of admirals, Chain of Command has my favorite admiral in it.
She's such a bitch.
She's such a bitch.
She doesn't even wear a fucking comm badge. She's just...
Elena Nechayev, the admiral that gets used the most after until Admiral Ross shows up on DS9. But she has a lot of continuity on TNG. She is not friends with Picard.
Nope.
She was on his court-martial hearing when he lost the Stargazer. So it's as far back as there.
When did that get announced?
That's part of Nechayev's book background.
So this is that alpha or beta canon?
Beta canon.
It's hot though.
Yeah.
She's got real Celine Lazarian vibes, man.
If you know who that is, you know exactly which we're talking about. And yeah, I love that Nechayev is a no-nonsense, security-oriented admiral who does not really give a shit about sentimentality in any way, shape, or form. And she is happy to push Jean-Luc Picard's shit in 6 inches deep if required to get the job done. And then whenever she shows up, it is going to be a bad time for your protagonists. She's never fun to have around. But she's also not wrong. It's like, I need a team that's going to go investigate this. I'm going to get the people together that know how. I'm going to keep it secret. And I'm going to send them. And then plan B is we're going to fight the fucking Cardassians. And that means I have to have a hard-nosed, veteran commander who's dealt with the Cardassians in the past in charge of this ship.
I'm sorry to interrupt you while you're on a hot roll here, but I would be remiss. I've found the thing on IMDb. Ray Wise. The guy that sent Voyager, or at least sent Janeway to go get fucking assimilated on the Prometheus.
Arcturus, yes. Arcturus was right. God. Everyone on RoboCop is good on TNG, on Star Trek. This is amazing.
It's fucking perfect.
RoboCop was the bridge.
Amazing.
Nechayev is right. Jellicoe should be in charge of the fucking Enterprise right now. We're about to go fight a war. I'm going to grab a crusty old man who fought the fucking Cardassians a bunch, like a Maxwell type, right? But with his fucking head screwed on tighter.
More to the point, he brokered the treaty. And that's really why he's there, is for his understanding of their psyche. Everything is brilliant in Chain of Command. Starting with, and perhaps most importantly, Jonathan Frakes' facial acting, which delighted my wife to no end. Beginning with Nechayev telling him to fuck off once he brings her up to Picard's ready room, and she just immediately dismisses him. I love the meeting where Nechayev's like laying out like, this is what's going on, and this is what we think's going to happen, and this is what they're trying to get us to do. You know, that they're trying to provoke us to war. And Riker's like, would we go to war? And she's like, I didn't say we'd go to war. Like him rolling his eyes and like looking at Troy like, this fucking bitch. So good the whole way through. How did Jellicoe become such a meme?
Because he's a hard ass, and people who
but like his goofy dad joke, awkward meme template of him like telling bad jokes to Troy and Troy walking out. Like, how did that all start? Do you have any idea?
I think it's just because Jellicoe is kind of like a cutout for being an authoritarian, and so you sort of defang that by having him be the dad joke guy. And he's a dad, right? And he has like his drawings from his son, like that he's brought onto the ship, right? Like it kind of fits. But I guess I want to once again robustly defend Captain Jellicoe's honor here. Okay, he is dead ass right on essentially every decision that he makes in command of the Enterprise. He's right to say, I don't have time to fuck around with these people. We're about to go fight a war. You do the things I tell you. You do them as quickly as possible. I want you to get to yes as quickly as you can. I don't have time to hear about your fucking feelings about it. Get it done. Right? Military leader. This is a military leader. He's somebody who understands that mindset. And he's right about how to fuck with the Klingon psyche. He's right about having determined where they were hiding and how. He's right about the plan to like set a bunch of fucking mines on their ships and put themselves in a position to negotiate with them from strength. You know, he fucking is aces the whole way. He's kind of a dick.
Though. He's still a flawed character. And that's obviously what makes him interesting, is that he could have just sat people down. All the conversations he has in confidence with like Picard about like, I don't have time to befriend people. Like this is life and death. Mm-hmm. He could have had everybody in the cargo bay and be like, hey guys, I don't have time to be everybody's friend. I'm here for a reason, and everybody
tell me, yeah. I need you to do what I'm telling you to do.
I know what I'm asking you to do is uncomfortable and scary, but we're on the brink of war, and trust me, this is why Starfleet's got me. Like, there's an easy bridge to cross. He chooses not to. He is intentionally a dick per the plot. And like, yes, his methodology, the ends are accomplished and it's good, but like he goes about it a fucked up way and causes a lot of conflict, and it's really fun as a consequence. Ro Laren, real quick, like, when does she leave for the security training? Because this is season 6. When did she kind of like disappear?
So it was only 8 episodes on TNG. So yeah, she was in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 season 5 episodes. Okay, Rascals in season 6.
Yes.
Only season 6 episode, and then that's it. Preemptive Strike after that. So Rascals was episode 7 of season 6. So sometime after that, and then she comes back right before the show ends.
So is she arguably or ostensibly on the Enterprise during all of this in Chain of Command?
No. So if you assumed that she left for training right after Rascals, which was episode 7, and Chain of Command is episode 10, then she might not have been there. You could justify a concept, a headcanon, that Ro Laren left for her advanced tactical training before this happened. That's why she wasn't on like the infiltration team or whatever.
Good writing to put her on for that. The most important part of Chain of Command is really showing how shitty the Cardassians are. Oh, yeah. The interplay. Well, the most important part of Chain of Command is Patrick Stewart going into the writing room and saying, write a script just for me so everybody sees how amazing I am. And they said, good. We've
Yeah, we
got
can
this
do
thing
that
here.
for you. Yeah, sure, Patrick, we got you. Like Ron
Sure.
Moore's like, yes, sir. Here we go.
The working title, according to Wikipedia for this, is the title working name was "Make Everybody Over the Age of 40 Feel Bad About Their Body" once Patrick Stewart takes his shirt off.
Yeah, you listen. This is the template by which we had Scott Bakula in the gym a lot too.
Yes,
Can't get shown up by Patrick Stewart.
absolutely.
But yeah, the Cardassians are once again portrayed as horrific torturers, as themselves
Generationally warped and
yes,
preaching their superiority / disregard for other sentient species. Like the scenes with him having his daughter in the torture chamber were amazing.
especially like the nonchalant way in which the daughter asked questions about it, and of course everything having to do with Picard's reaction to that, culminating with him turning the tables on his torturer, right? To start mocking him to his face after he revealed that, part of the reason why he engages in this behavior is because of his own childhood trauma. There's also some really deep background in what you get here, which is that Cardassia did not fare well economically when it attempted to fight a war with the Federation the last time, right? Which is, again, another reason why this has put them in a position where they can't really engage in a full-scale conflict with the Federation and expect it to go well for them. They're really tempting the tolerance of the Federation in their desire to never fight if possible. And that's really what they're trying to do here is, okay, we've got these extra ships that we're not using. We're getting kind of our shit pushed around and around Bajor right now because of what happened there. So why don't we take something from the Federation to kind of regain our tactical initiative and our sense of military honor? And they are definitely willing to capture and torture Jean-Luc Picard to accomplish that goal. But unfortunately for them, Captain Jellicoe, too slick, and mines their whole fleet and tells them if they don't give them up, they're going to blow them up. So
I will say that kind of felt a little, let's wrap this up quickie.
Oh, sure.
Which, is a Star Trek hallmark. For the longest time, I always would think back on Chain of Command, like, why the fuck did they take the flagship captain and pull him out and send him on a fucking special operations mission that could have been like red shirts? And as I'm sitting there watching it, it's like, oh, because this whole thing was a fucking trap on this theta radiation thing that basically Picard was the only person that they could have sent for it. And like how devious these guys are, and great writing. Not a whiff of ramrod in any of the, at least the setup on how they would get Picard off the bridge of his Galaxy class flagship and into a fucking cave. My wife, I'm so sick of these caves. Because I want to say they use the caves.
You just learn to love them. You just start to embrace them.
Because they use the caves in Ensign Ro too, and they're like looking for terrorists and shit. She's like, oh, these caves again. I was like, oh, honey, you don't even know.
I hope you want to watch it. I hope you're done watching Star Trek if you don't want to see these fucking caves.
What if I told you that these caves smell like cat piss? Because the caves were built over an old 1940s opulent swimming pool, and it was full of stray cats fucking and pissing everywhere.
Oh man, it's like
full immersion.
Yeah, it's a real test of your Star Trek character when you have to use the fucking Hell Cave set.
Mm-hmm.
Last on our list to talk about here is Preemptive Strike. Preemptive Strike is a bit of a look forward because the Maquis become a major part of DS9's story starting in season 2. But we're already somewhat familiar with them thanks to Voyager. So we're really not spoiling anything you don't already know. And I think that not only is it nice to see the end of Ensign Ro and like what could have been a character we saw in DS9, but also who are the Maquis from the kind of inside? Like let's see them in their natural habitat. Let's see how the Federation responds to that and how that complicates the political matter between them and the Cardassians overall. And the episode does a good job of portraying that. First and foremost, though, as I mentioned, that's one that's directed by Patrick Stewart. And you can tell because Patrick Stewart's a horny man. It's one of those things that if you read anything about him, you know that he's a horny guy.
Amazing I was ignorant to all of that prior to like 4 months ago.
Really? Okay. Yeah,
I didn't know about him breaking his marriage over Vosh and all that other stuff.
Oh, all right. Yeah, there's always been the dark book on Patrick Stewart is that he loves to fuck.
Do you think that Preemptive Strike was a bad look for Picard?
No, I think I think the story in Preemptive Strike is awesome. I think this, as mentioned, they dig deep on the fact that Jean-Luc Picard definitely is interested in a sexual fashion in Ro Laren, and Ro Laren is interested in him. Right? It's a mutual attraction between the two of them.
I think it's
it's mutual. If she smiles at him with that sort of
yeah, but it almost I don't want to say predatory, but she is enamored with him as a figure, as a hero and figure of authority. And I think there's the sexual stuff, but it's secondary to the hero worship that she develops, which clearly was not there initially when she comes in Ensign Ro. I'm saying, do you think it's a bad look for Picard in that he gets as firm with her on completing the mission as he does? Because there is this moment, there's two moments in Patrick Stewart's acting catalog, not counting Picard season 1 or season 2, where I feel like we have a character that we know very well, specifically Picard, and then Charles Xavier, where, you know, if I were to sit here and have you like tell me 10 things about Charles Xavier or Picard, none of those things are featured in the two scenes. One is that dumb scene where you find out all the bad shit he had been doing to Jean Grey, like suppressing the Phoenix and like putting all those forgetful minds in her head and like basically mind fucking her to like create a fake Jean Grey while he molds her in the image he wants. And you're like, none of this fits Professor X. Like, where is all this coming from? Is Professor X evil? Like, you're asking me to go to, you're making a hard left turn here. And this scene with him and Ro Laren, like, I've never seen him sit there and tell someone like, you better do what I tell you to do, or I'm going to fire you and get you sent to jail. And it's like, that is not his style at all. Like, that feels very wildly uncharacteristic.
I don't think it's wildly uncharacteristic. So I looked at it through the lens that at this point, Picard had invested a lot of his credibility in supporting Ro Laren's career resurrection. Yes. And up to putting her on the con of the flagship and ultimately sponsoring her to take advanced tactical training and resulting in her promotion, right? And furtherance of her career into a new legitimate frame that she probably didn't necessarily deserve in the eyes of a lot of people, but everyone accepted and permitted because Jean-Luc Picard, the captain of the Federation flagship, said it shall be thus, right? And he's very proud of the fact that this bet has paid off, right? He extended the opportunity to Ro Laren, and it went from a charity case all the way to, no, I'm right. She just needed a second chance to prove that she was Starfleet material, and look at her now, right? She's proven herself more capable in things that, we need someone that can do, like run covert ops. And here we are at the fulcrum point of a very layered plan to capture a bunch of people that the Federation have decided are fucking terrorists. All right. They're imperiling this delicate peace that we have finally firmly established with the Cardassians. We have a demilitarized zone. We have treaty obligations and all of these diplomatic channels through which things are supposed to happen. They can't do things. We can't do things. Things get inspected. There's a whole array of ways we're going to enforce this. And these fucking redneck, space colonists are out there fucking around using Federation weapons on Federation ships to attack Cardassian vessels. Not okay, right? We need to fucking put an end to this. We need to put an end to this now. And you send your protege out there who you have invested in, that you have a personal interest in, who has so far run this playbook very well, and you get to the point where she's starting to falter. She is saying things that suggest sympathy with the Cardassians. We know in the plot of this episode and in other episodes around it on DS9 that Federation officers have defected to the Maquis. And
it's reinforced several times because the Maquis terrorist cells are using like Type 8 phasers and photon torpedoes. That's big deal stuff. Like they are being funneled real shit here.
And we know one of the officers that is referenced in this episode is in fact Chakotay, the lieutenant commander that trained Ro during the tactical training that left. They don't name him as Chakotay, but when they were writing Chakotay, they said that's him. That's the guy from that episode. Because he was a lieutenant commander. He had taken advanced tactical training. And they're like, that's it. That's who Ro was referring to. That's the one that
backed her and that he left.
Correct. And they were actually going to have a flashback scene at one point where they were going to try to get Michelle Forbes to do that, which didn't obviously end up happening.
There's the last characteristic I would assign to Chakotay is badass.
Right.
That is a big ask of my mind's eye to believe that Chakotay had anything to do with advanced tactics.
Except if it was a Kuchamoya related. Little, bullshit flutes. Just because it filters through the podcast one more time.
So there's a lot riding for Picard. And also there's writing on the wall that he should have known, like, okay, there's a problem here. Like, she tries to scrub the mission earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, listen, I need you to be 100% sparkle motion. Can you do this? And then she's like, well, I really don't like it, but I'm not going to let you down, boss. And like, that's a big red flag. And like, that's good self-doubt for him. Like, I'm just saying it's perhaps the worst moment I think you can say you've ever seen Picard in, like where he is the least diplomatic. And maybe it's desperation. Like he sees the writing on the wall and he knows that he's helpless to stop it. And like he's floundering in a way that we've never seen him flounder before.
Right before he gets into those, he does say like, Laren, what's going on? He uses he uses her first name. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he's detecting the danger and he's exposed himself on a professional level. And he's hearing basically that this woman who he has resurrected the career of, and a lot's riding on him being correct about this from a political and personal prestige and credibility sense, that she doesn't turn traitor. And all of a sudden, that's all he's hearing is sympathy, is the potential for this to happen. And if, the worst thing for him would be, oh, you gave Ro Laren a shot. We gave her advanced training. And what's the first thing she does? Runs
off reservation.
Yeah. So the fact he snaps back at her like real hard to remind her, like, I've treated you real good up to this point, but I need to remind you there are stakes here that are beyond just you being a normal Starfleet guy. You're not. You're on double secret probation still, and if you don't fucking come through, there's going to be consequences.
Yeah, I guess that's the bad look I'm saying for him in this moment is I've never seen Jean-Luc Picard have to resort to saying or else.
I agree, but I think in this case it makes sense. That's what I'm saying. Like he's never been in this position before, and it's a person, and he's already starting to feel the potential of the pain of the personal betrayal that it essentially is.
And that's the most delicious part, obviously. this is an interesting story, Preemptive Strike, because it is set on the Enterprise, but the Enterprise crew is not the main character. And it's an interesting episode that you're able to frame people's interactions where the hero isn't Jean-Luc Picard. He's not the main character, and seeing like, how does this guy react as a secondary character? The closing scene where like Riker reports, and I like Riker's like real cool, chill bro out moment. Like I thought I remembered her zapping him and like stunning him, but in fact, it's just like, you know, she kind of pulls a phaser. He doesn't fight at all. And he's like, so like there's a sympathy, right? Like, yeah, part of me kind of would like to go and fuck these guys up too. Like, you know, watch yourself out there. Good luck. Not reciprocated by Picard, who just sits there burning a hole in the wall with the fucking stare. He doesn't even acknowledge Riker on the way out. And it's like the last 5 seconds is that pan around shot of him just fucking pissed. And like, what a weird episode to basically close the main show out, is like Picard taking a big fat L before, you know, you go into All Good Things, which is the best series finale I think ever created in man's history.
Yeah, kind of hard to top. And the fact that it's a betrayal that stings so hard that literally 30 years later,
and that's what I'm getting to.
Pissed about it. Yeah.
You get into Picard season 3 where they break her out for one episode. And the fact that I think Patrick Stewart directed that episode, Preemptive Strike, and like 100% of Picard's reaction there and like how it's portrayed is all Patrick Stewart. So bringing her in had to be a real big win for Metalis, where it's like, all right, buddy, this is like basically your vanity plot was her. And here's the chance to go back and like really indulge that power struggle between these people, turning the tables, and the audacity of her to come in and like fucking point a finger at you. Hot.
Oh, absolutely. And credit to Patrick Stewart in that regard, as much as we might give him a little razz for for giving Ro the sex eye because he happened to have the director's chair that day. At the same time, like he took that episode. We mentioned it when we reviewed it, right? Like how talented an actor are both him and Michelle Forbes. They're like, hey, remember 30 years ago when we did that fucking TV show?
Just watch the fucking episode. Like, you take 45 minutes, rewatch us, and be like, oh, yeah, I can tap back into that.
Let's get back into that. How about I've been mad about that for 30 years, and you've been too cowardly to like apologize for it for 30 years.
We should pull guns on each other.
Yeah, let's really have it out, and you know, and they nail it all. And
so all that stuff through Preemptive Strike, though, again, basically is proven true. Cardassians are being armed by their government. They're going in, they're doing terrorist stuff, shooting up, you know, whatever that, it wasn't Celtus 5, whatever the colony is where old man Ernest Borgnine gets shot and dies before, you know, after he's like, the moment where he locks Ro Laren in, where he's like, oh, your poor dad, that I'm basically, you know, I like to eat what he would make, and we both play the fucking accordion or whatever. And
Hasperat, yeah.
I'm dying. Great call out there, Jesus. I'm dying, but I'm going to pass the baton of rebellion to you, and, you know, you're going to realize all these truths and blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at the little town square there, and all I see is the fucking Skeevian Mall food court. Like that colony is so simplistic.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And like
it's so
silly.
Basic. Yeah.
But the story's so good, you don't have a chance to fucking sit there and razz it. Like, again, TNG scripts, they use the same hokey set piece as everybody else did. Maybe a little bit less Cardassian hallway, but like, you don't notice it because the story is so compelling and stuff. But yeah, Cardassians being total shitbags. Unfortunately, in this version of Earth's events, smartphones are never enabled. So, you know, there's no chance to record video of these Cardassian hooded monk folk shooting at people in an active shooter event that would have made 7 of 9 proud. And to really reinforce this Federation hypocrisy that you hear from people through this Cardassian conflict, which is that Starfleet and the Federation turn a blind eye to our suffering. And it's only once we try to fight back, do they bother coming over here and saying, hey, you're Federation citizens. There's expectations on how you're going to act and blah, blah, blah.
I
Which
mean,
again,
this is the key sort of premise of the Maquis in how they fit into the story of TNG DS9 Berman era Trek, and that they are the consequence of a unreactive, somewhat sclerotic Federation bureaucracy and a need to try and create the most good possible, even if it squeezes at the margins the fortunes of people who aren't living in the core system largesse of places like Earth. And the fact that a bunch of people who made their lives on these colonies in the borders suddenly are being terrorized by Cardassians because they're in this somewhat arbitrary demilitarized zone that prevents the Federation from protecting their interests, and that their attempts to protect their own interests are something the Federation is willing to actively work against, and that you have Federation officers in large numbers who essentially are not liking that this is the case, that have a moral code that calls them to this. Like, it creates something interesting there, and that it creates a geopolitical tension as well.
And it's amazing that Voyager did nothing but shit the bed with that.
Yeah.
The entire Maquis concept should have been a driving force. Absolute was not. I know that's not going to be the case with DS9, but I'm looking forward in DS9 to seeing this Maquis struggle, because really the elephant in the room in all of this is you're living in this post-scarcity Federation utopia. Like, why do you need to be on this colony? Take all your shit, put it in the replicator, dematerialize it, take out the isolinear chip, put it in your little tube duffel bag, and go somewhere else and live great. You don't need to be there. Or, at the end of the day, does the Federation not actually want that? Because if the colonists leave, then the Cardassians can take over. And basically, do you become an acceptable risk margin?
Are you a personal buffer for
right.
Cardassian interests by your presence? Do we have to encourage your suffering in order to create more security for everyone else? All very cool, all very interesting. And
that's
I think
some Ronald Moore talk there.
It is. And get used to that, man. Like, get used to the Ron Moore flavor, because we're about to venture into a full meal of it. So overall, was this worth doing, Peter? Did you enjoy this walk back through TNG? Do you think are you hype for DS9?
I'm just enamored. I felt like I took a nice vacation. Like, there was a nice reward for having to go back in the series rip and remember the back end of season 1 and all of pretty much season 2. I listened to our review of Night in Sickbay and Marauders.
Oh,
there's shit that pissed me off that I forgot even happened.
Like what? For Marauders particularly, remind me.
The premise that you had 7 fucking Klingons holding everybody hostage, where they could have like bum rushed them, and that they should have not made the oil farmers or the dilithium farmers capable. Like, they should have been pacifists or old men or people who were being starved or somehow held at a serious disadvantage instead of like able-bodied people that should have been able to surround them. And then also, and I completely forgot about this, the ongoing problem between season 1 and season 2 where people that legitimately asked Archer for help were denied. But anybody that said, please leave me alone, you don't belong in this situation, Archer moving to great acts of violence and killing people to white knight them.
That's true. That does happen quite a bit, doesn't it? Damn.
I mean, it's like we sat there and we went like episode by episode, and like all the times that people were like, please help me. And he's like, no, I will not get involved in this. Dear Doctor specifically, and a lot of these other conflicts like Desert Crossing, like we're being eradicated. Also, the hostile, established government is shooting at you and your people, and him being like, I'm not going to fire back. I'm going to put up with all this bullshit. But then people are like, please leave before these Klingons kill everybody. No, it's our obligation to help, but we're not going to kill anybody. And you're going to look like fucking clowns. And you could have just fixed the entire episode by swapping out Nausicaans for the Klingons and then be able to tell a story about bully cowards who leave and never come back.
Well, fortunately, those days are behind us. Enterprise is in the dust. DS9 is in our future. I hope everyone has enjoyed this review of our DS9 homework. And
I enjoyed fucking going through the dessert line at the buffet, man. This was just...
Yeah, this was great.
Again, to hold my wife not enamored, but I mean, she came back for every fucking episode. Like, shit I never would have thought would happen.
And it won't be long before you're hearing Emissary review from us. So stay tuned, and thanks for listening.